In this next video, I am going to provide you with some ideas on how a foundation can be assembled for a raised floor in our small one-bedroom house. So in the previous example, I showed you how you could build the foundation for a solid concrete slab with footings. And in this one, we're going to use stem walls. And I would also like to point out that the measurements in this video might be different on your project. However, I am going to provide you with some of them as we go along. And I will start with the footings here that are going to be 12 inches wide and 12 inches deep, or 1 foot by 1 foot, and our walls are going to be 18 inches tall. And we are also going to need to block out for an access hole so that we can get underneath the house to fix plumbing, electrical, or anything that might be a problem in the future. And after you have firmly secured the outside perimeter of the building foundation, you can go ahead and start installing the interior section of the forming. And the forms are going to be spaced 6 inches apart so that we have a stem wall that is going to be 6 inches wide. And the access hole for most building codes is going to be 18 inches tall by 24 inches wide. And we made ours a little bit larger than that, but you can see how all you need to do is install a couple of boards here and firmly attach them to the building forms. Next up, let's go ahead and install the rebar. We're going to keep it about 2 to 3 inches away from the wood and center it in between the forms. And we are going to be using number 4 or 1/2 inch rebar. And as you can see, the bottom piece of rebar continues through the footing, and the upper two will stop at the block out. And your concrete foundation might require 2 pieces of rebar at the bottom. And don't forget to check with your local building department to make sure that you have all of the building code questions that you have answered. And of course, you're not always going to get that from videos on YouTube or even the correct information on YouTube. Trust me on that one. And I'm not about to suggest that I'm always going to be able to provide you with the correct information also. And one of those things to check would be the minimum distance that the rebar can lap. It's usually going to be 40 times the diameter, which would be about 20 inches. And I like to have my laps a minimum of 24 inches. However, if 20 inches is the minimum, we don't need to get carried away. And hopefully this makes sense with the rebar. And another view without the forms. And of course, a view with the anchor bolts before we put the forms in. And again, this is something you can't always do on the job site. However, with this modeling stuff, you can zoom right into anything you want. And one of those things will be the fact that we're going to need anchor bolts within 12 inches of the break. And that would be the framing plate breaks, which I will provide you with in a few minutes here. And sometimes the rebar is going to connect to the anchor bolts, and sometimes it's going to be a problem, especially if you're going to be using 2x4 framing plates, along with trying to center the rebar in between the 6-inch stem wall. Next up, let's get our inspection if we're getting one, and if not, then it's time to pour the concrete and strip the forms after it dries, of course. And again, a good look at the anchor bolts in the corner. You need to make sure that you're laying out the anchor bolts for your framing plate breaks. And if you don't walk away from anything in this video, make sure that you lay them out to miss all of the joist also. And I can't tell you how many times I've worked on a project where that just wasn't the case. And here is the example I was referring to where the anchor bolts are within 12 inches of the break on each side. And we even moved the anchor bolts in a little bit so that we didn't need to notch so much out of the rim, but you can do it however you want to, and even use 2x6 sill plates. And another thing I like to do is to run the sill plate past the opening here, even though you don't have to do that, especially if you need a little more room for access. And now let's go ahead and install our floor joist along with our mid-span blocks, and the blocks we're going going to use to support our walls that are going to run parallel to the floor joist. So let's go ahead and take a closer look at the blocks along with our doubler so that we can support the joist. And even though I did not install a hanger, you might want to install hangers here, even if you are going to be using 2x6 framing plates. And we will also need to cut out sections of the rim joist so that we can install some vents so that we can have some crawl space ventilation if that is what you need. I know some people are building crawl spaces without ventilation, but again, that's something that you might want to double check on. I'm not entirely sold on that idea. And a view of the midspan blocks that are staggered so you can get better nailing. If you run them in a line, they won't be as easy to nail. Next up, let's go ahead and take a look at our wall framing. And we're blocking instead of installing double joist underneath the walls. And that might not be necessary on this side. You could always install a double joist under this wall. However, it's going to be difficult to install a double joist under any wall that you're going to be installing plumbing pipes in. So this method here might be preferred to the double joist. And hopefully that makes sense. Another view of it there. Take a look at this side, and there's no need to run the blocks past here because you're not going to be supporting a wall. However, I like to have this block stop underneath this wall here to get a little extra support. And again, you can get a good view from here what we're blocking, and of course the vent here. Now let's go ahead and remove the walls so that we can install our floor sheathing, and we're going to be using 3/4 inch OSB or plywood, whatever you want to use. And of course, even though you can't see it right now, once I install the stairway, and for whatever reason you didn't allow for it and you put a vent in here, you're not going to be happy. So let's take some time and lay out all of your ventilation vents so that they aren't going to be covered up by a stairway or anything else that you're planning on installing in the future. And with that, we are now at the end of the video, and if you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them in the comment area and I will try to answer them as soon as possible. And for those of you who might not be familiar with my videos, I've already designed this house, framed it, have the plans, walked you through it. I think I have about 4 videos on it, and I will put a link here in the video for those of you who are interested.